Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. How are you? You will be hearing this beginning of November. So we had the podcast anniversary, 5 years. I can't believe it's been 5 years, over 300 episodes. It's just amazing. What I want to talk to you today about, that always sounds awkward. Somebody write to me and tell me how I should say it that's a little bit more smooth. Anyways, I hear so many of you, and I'm living it, friendship struggles, relationships. Friendships are bleeping hard. They just are. And if you have a brain that's wired differently, it's just going to be hard, and there are going to be all kinds of bumps. And let me tell you, I am living this right now. And I find it really interesting that inevitably, when I come on the podcast, I tell you, like, I'm in this great groove and I'm paddling and I'm doing all these miles and I'm going to Aquafit and I'm doing all these things. Inevitably, something happens where that shifts. I get an infection, my back is hurting, I end up not doing it, and then there's a setback. Or if I tell you, like, yeah, I've got all these friends now and I'm feeling really connected, and something happens and boom, there's just a shift. I think this is the nature of being alive, that life is about ups and downs and ins and outs. And I think that we have this expectation that that growth is linear. And if we do quote the right thing, whatever that is, if you know what that is, tell me, I'd love to know, that we will achieve something and we will be able to maintain it. And based on my experience, that is just not what happens. And does this mean that I'm being jinxed or I shouldn't talk about things? No, I'm really about sharing with you everything that goes on, the ups, the downs, the disappointments, the joys. It's just part of being human. And I really want to pull the curtain back on what it means to live a life if you're a deep feeler and a deep thinker. It's just what we go through. I'm mostly through this most recent relationship blip. My concern is that I will share in a way that feels unkind or biased because I was hurt by it. And if that happens, it's certainly not my intention. I don't know how to share with you about the things that go on without talking about real life situations. I do my best to protect people's identity because this is really about sharing with you what went on for me. And hopefully I'll remember to tell you a part of one of these people is, well, I'll just tell you right now, one of these people is on social media and has a very, very big following. I'm a little envious and jelly. And after this happened, I had this thought of like, oh my gosh, what if they're talking about it and they're naming me? I don't have any issue with them talking about their experience. Three people have a very, very different, or at least two people have a very different experience than I do around this situation. And I have no problem if all three of them wanted to go on 57 podcasts and talk about their perception. Being named in it would not feel okay for me. And I went through some contortions around this, wondering if they were going to keep me anonymous or not. I don't have a lot of control over that. So if you happen to hear anything disparaging about me, please feel free to let me know. I'm really not too concerned about it. I found a group of autistic professionals, and we had this very, very, very sweet connection. I really felt like I had kind of found home, especially around this time of anticipating getting a formal autism diagnosis and then post-diagnosis. And I felt incredibly, incredibly held and supported by these autistic professionals. And it's really interesting that we added a fourth person to the group. And there was something that happened. I'm trying to think of the best analogy. I've been thinking about this for a while. Big surprise, right? I was thinking about if you're served a dish of food, and this may not fit for everybody, and there's something that's in that dish that, like, you eat it and you mostly like it, but there's something that just I don't know, maybe your mouth burns a little bit afterwards, or there's something that goes on in your body that just is a little bit off. And every time you have this dish, you're trying to figure out what is it about this that for the most part you enjoy, but there's something that just doesn't sit right with you. And with one of the people in this group that I felt very close to, this person and I talked pretty much daily. And I said, historically, I've been told that I gossip, and it doesn't feel like gossip. It feels like I'm trying to it's like discernment, trying to figure out. And this fourth person that we added to the group, there was something about this person that just bumped up against some of my stuff. Didn't mean I didn't like the person, didn't mean I didn't want the person in the group, but there was something that just kind of made me bristle. And it's important for me to understand what it is. And I made an assumption, quite incorrectly so, that this person would be able to know that I was just trying to sort this out. And I had asked them and they said, no, it's fine. And then in one of the group communications that we had, this person that I'm telling you that I kind of bumped up against said that they thought that I didn't like them, and also projected something else on me that I'm really clear wasn't mine. And so in this group communication, I said, no, not at all. Let me give you a little context. And the group communication often felt very overwhelming to me because there were 4 people talking about things. And if I wasn't checking in, it felt like a lot. And I did give the person some feedback. And I said, I don't know how that's going to land with you. If you have an issue with it, please feel free to come talk to me, because it's not my intention to be unkind. And with this issue that they were projecting, I named it and said, I'm fine if you project on me. I'm really clear that that's not my stuff. And I also asked the person that I had shared with about this fourth person, would you listen to my message and let me know, did it feel kind? Was it okay? Because I know I'm having this internal kind of reaction, but I'm thinking that I'm containing it and I'm not letting that leak out. And the person said, no, you did a beautiful job. It was fine. And I thought, great. Then the person that I left the message for sent me a text, said, no, it's fine. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I'm like, phew, good. Kind of went about my merry way. And then this is what I recall the progression of things that happened is within a couple of days, this fourth person sent a group message and said, I've decided to leave the group. I'm going to be doing other things, left and deleted themselves from the group communication. So we couldn't really go in and respond to that. And part of me wasn't surprised. I think that if you have somebody that doesn't let you know what's going on, that often the way that they handle things is by leaving without doing closure. No judgment. But I had said in the group communication to the other 2 people that were remaining, I'm not surprised this person left. I think it's important for us as a group to talk about it. One of the best things that I learned back when I was in my 30s and I lived in the recovery home for my eating disorder is it would not be unusual for somebody. There were very strict house rules. I was thinking recently about looking back through the lens of my autism that loves structure and rules. And it really worked for me to be in this residential facility for almost a year because the rules were so clear. But there were a number of people that went through the recovery home who would break a rule and they would get discharged from the house. And we would always have a group meeting with one of staff and we would talk about how we were impacted by that and what were our perceptions. How many of you have experienced this in your family where something happens and you as a family sit down, growing up in your family of origin, as a family you would sit down and process what this experience was like? I certainly never had it. I mean, at 5, my dad got up and left and that was it. This processing when there are changes in our family, whether it's a family by choice or a family of origin system, in my estimation is a very healthy thing to do. Nobody responded. And we had a Zoom meeting within a day or two and we met. And again, I can't remember the order of things, so I could be confusing this. But we had a group meeting. We talked a little bit about it at the end and I shared what my thoughts were about this person leaving. And I don't know, within a day or two, communication with everybody stopped. And I had sent a message individually to one of the people and said, I'm wondering if this is what your silence means. Here's the story that I'm making up in my head. And within a day, they came back and said, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. I think that you othered this other person. I think you were unkind. And my response was, I'm human. I made a mistake. And rupture and repair is part of every relationship. And is there no room for being imperfect here? That was the end of it with that person. With the other person that I was communicating with daily, again, there was a break in communication. And so I got up really early one morning and crafted an email and said, again, haven't heard from you. Don't know if something happened, if everything's okay. Here's the story I'm making up in my head. And again, communicated and explained a little bit more about the dynamic that I saw. Waited a day, got an email back, pretty much saying the same thing, that I had othered this other person. They didn't want to be in a relationship with me. And what they said at some point, I had asked for clarification because that message that I had left to the person, giving context about, it's not that I don't like you, this is the stuff that I bump up against. One of the people felt like I was telling that person that they were too much, and they had pulled back a little bit thinking that they were too much. And I explained that wasn't what I was experiencing and tried to provide some context for it. And then the other person who I'd asked them to check my message initially and said that it was okay, then came back to me and said that it was not okay. And so I privately said to her, I'm confused that you told me it was fine. And then she leaves the group and now you're telling me that it's not okay. And I had shared in an earlier episode, I think it's episode 210, that I talked about somebody telling me that they really loved being with me, but I was intense and that after 2 to 3 hours, it's hard for them to be around me or it's too much. And what this person in this autism group said is that what this person said to me is what I said to the other person. I did the same thing to them. I still struggled because I didn't see it. And I felt like my intentions were clear, but I don't know. So now the relationship, one person's left the group. The other two have said they don't want to be in a relationship with me. Man, it was really tough. And one of the things that Jen and I talked about is, can I be okay with people having a very different perception of me than I have of myself? And one of the things that feels really important to me, one of my values, is that I feel like I'm honest and straightforward and kind, and it's not my intention to hurt people. I went back and listened to the message that I sent. They did give me some specific examples of things that I said. And then I thought maybe it was hurtful and it wasn't my intention to be hurtful. I sat with it for a day or two and I sent this person an email, very short and sweet, and said, I'm really sorry. I think I hurt your feelings. I think I wasn't unkind. That was not my intention. I'm very sorry. Had I realized that I had done that, I would have corrected it. And if nobody gives me feedback about my communication, then I can't change it. I didn't think I had an expectation that I would hear back from them, but as I would frequently check my email and realize that they didn't respond, I realized I had an expectation. Never heard back from them. What this activated for me was some immense grief around the dissolution of many, 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 many relationships historically that I don't think I ever had the ability or the awareness to process the sadness. And I'll tell you, I went into, it was one day, but I really sunk into it. And it's interesting that I noticed that this came out with my husband. We processed it, but I had told him that I typically go into kind of a shutdown mode, a freeze mode is kind of my go-to response. And I was saying, I really didn't want to do that, that it was a Saturday and I kind of wanted to get busy. That oftentimes when we have feelings, we can get angry and that motivates us, or we can get sad and it kind of shuts us down. Again, this is not, I'm reluctant because I don't want to make this sound like there's anything that my husband did that was wrong. This is just to illustrate a story. So please give him lots of grace. As you know, I struggle with clutter. My ADHD is really, when it comes to things around the house, it's just not great. The clutter is generally limited to certain areas of the house. It's not like it looks like a hoarder's house, but it's getting kind of bad. And so I said, I really want to work on the clutter today. And I started working on it, and he sat in the lazy chair and then he fell asleep. And I felt really abandoned. And because I was really struggling, I did as much as I could in the living room. And then I came into the office and kind of tried to get busy and I couldn't. And then I just ended up laying down on the bed and I probably fell asleep. And after a while, he came in. I think I got up and went into the other room and he was awake and watching TV. And then I also realized that I have this thing that when he's watching TV, I'm trying to think of how to clean this up, but I don't think I can. Let me move forward. And then if I remember, I'll come back and clean this up. Anyways, I must have gone out to do something. And then I came back and was just silently crying on the bed because I just felt so much pain for this thing that happened with this group that I thought these were my people. These were my autistic professionals. I thought they'd get me. And then I felt like they didn't understand me. And now I'm feeling the grief of all the relationships that haven't worked out. I asked for support from my husband. It just didn't work. And now he's watching TV and I feel like I'm relegated to the bedroom, which is not the truth, but that's what was going on for me. And he came in and it's interesting. I suspect that early on in our marriage, this dynamic happened a lot where I just was so hurt and angry. And my fear was that if I got angry with him, I'd push him away too, and then there'd be nobody there. So this is young. This is disempowered. There's no 60-year-old adult on board in this moment. We did end up talking, and I did tell him as I'm crying and not being able to look at him, my back is towards him, that I had asked for his help and he didn't help me. And he felt very, very, very remorseful. And I just was in this very disempowered place. I mean, we got through it. It's fine. He didn't do anything wrong. But I'm sharing this with you because I could just see my skill set regressing and how I needed someone to help regulate me, that I wanted to stay busy. I wanted to stay focused. And when he fell asleep, I felt really abandoned. I'm an adult. Nobody could abandon me today. So I really want to clarify that he didn't do anything wrong. But this is how these wounds and this trauma, relationship trauma, can show up. One of the things that I really reminded myself was, what is it that I want in my relationships with people? I want to be able to unmask in my close relationships. So unmasking is being totally who I am without monitoring, self-monitoring, feeling like I have to contain myself, just being very authentic. I don't do it around a lot of people. And if I misstep, I expect that somebody will tell me kindly and with compassion, as much as they have, that I have misstepped and we can do rupture and repair work, because that's just what happens. Miscommunication is to be expected, and rupture and repair is just part of any relationship. These people didn't have those skills, and I had this expectation that they were therapists and they were autistic, and of course they would be able to have room for me. Not the case. So what I would invite you to do is, if you are having challenges in relationships, or if you have had challenges in relationships and they haven't ended well, to either currently or go back and look at what are your values in your relationships. Are they communication? Is it loyalty? Is it dependability? Is it honesty? Is it being able to have hard conversations? It's going to be different for everyone. And did that person have those skills that you value in that relationship when it ended? I think we often get so caught up in missing the person, missing the relationship, that we don't see that there are certain things that we're needing. So I had to keep dropping back to that of, I need to be in relationships with people that we can do rupture and repair work. And that obviously was not a possibility in this group of people. Ironically, one of the people had something very specific going on in their life, and I got something custom made for somebody in their life. And the day that they sent me the email saying that, they didn't want to be friends, that item was arriving at their house. I don't know what happened to it, but I just thought that was ironic. And in this very, very, very painful place that I was at this day that I'm telling you about, where my husband and I had a little bit of a hiccup, and I just was feeling incredibly, incredibly raw and disempowered. And I'm on TikTok, which is what I do. It's soothing to me. I was seeing lots of TikToks about people having conflict in relationships, and I could see it from all perspectives. And I really ended up having much more compassion for the person that told me that they love being around me for about 2 to 3 hours and then it's enough. There's also something about that comment that instead of them communicating directly with me about something that was bigger that I'm not going to go into, this may have been their way of letting me know that something bigger in context. I know I'm being very vague, but I really do want to protect people's privacy. And so it's very possible that I took this specific piece and have grabbed onto it and am clinging to it literally. And it's very possible that this was communication that was meant in a larger context about something else that I haven't talked about and I'm not going to talk about. I don't know. And it really helped me to have compassion. And I really was able to send love and light to these 3 people that I thought were my people. And to know that we're all just on this journey and we're doing our best. And it's very possible too that this was an autistic bump. And I'm wondering about a bump that I had in another relationship that I told you when I shared with a friend that I suspected I was autistic. And they kind of doubled down about why I wasn't, and that they went to their neuropsych who discounted autism in women and self-diagnosis. That, I'm not saying whether this person is autistic or not, but I think sometimes we form these beliefs that are very, very rigid and very firm and feel very solid to us, but may not have the flexibility and the ability to shift perspectives. And so who knows? So I'm really working on having compassion, but it was incredibly painful. It was very painful. And part of what I had to work on is it okay for people to have a very different experience of me than I have for myself? I'm kind of trying to figure out where I want to head from here. I think what I'm going to do is it's kind of along the same line. And I know I was going to drop back and share something with you, and I can't remember what it was. So sorry, that's just lost and gone now. I got the written portion of my autism evaluation back. And I think I shared this with you that obviously I'm autistic and I do have the PDA profile, which is pathological demand avoidance or pervasive persistent drive for autonomy, which is a nervous system response. It's a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response when there are threats to my autonomy. I suspect that as we get older and we learn to manage things, even though it may be that autonomic nervous system response, it feels very different for me. And I've also been wanting to talk a little bit about my take on anxiety. So I'm just making a note here and see if I could drop back to this. Anyways, so I got a 20-page written evaluation back from the person that diagnosed me. It was a very positive experience. This is not a criticism to the evaluator. And it's very possible that they have a boilerplate template and that they go through it and just put in the pertinent information about the person. So this may have already been in their evaluation, and in the 20 pages, I'm talking to you about one very small part. I'm thinking I talked to you about this already. I'm having a sense of deja vu. So if you've heard this before, oh well. So there's this one little paragraph in the evaluation, and it talks about that my interpersonal style is pragmatic and I'm independent. I agree with that. It's this next sentence. It just, oh man, ouch. It said, talking about me, she is not likely to be perceived by others as a warm and friendly person. That just hit me. The last sentence is, although she is not necessarily lacking in social skills, she can be reasonably effective in social situations. But it was the sentence, she is not likely to be perceived by others as a warm and friendly person. And again, you know what I did is I sent a screenshot of just that paragraph to my son's girlfriend and said, hey, can you help me out? When you first met me, does this resonate? And she's like, no, absolutely not. And I just felt this tremendous sense of relief. And again, if you have something that somebody tells you something and you have a really big reaction like I did, this is an opportunity to see what are your values. So my values are, and maybe this is about my masking, is that I believe that I come off and I want to come off as being warm and friendly. If I don't like you, if you've done something to me, then that's a whole different ball of wax. And I don't really care about being warm and friendly, but just in general, I like to believe that I'm a warm and friendly, compassionate, caring person. And it was funny, this was during the time when I was close with these autistic professionals, and one of them said, like, do you just want to write over on the evaluation and fix it? I'm like, yeah, I do. And the part of me that's very pedantic, which means details and phrasing and words are very, very important. You don't want it to write back to the assessor and say, did you mean this? Was this really your experience of me? I did share during the assessment that I am a slow to warm up person, that it takes me time to warm up, but I think I'm genuinely friendly. But I had the hardest time with this. It really stuck in my craw. And I'm sharing it with you because if somebody tells you something and you have a big reaction, it's an indicator of what are your values about yourself. And is this true? Is it not? And again, I have to be okay with this. May have been a boilerplate thing. And out of 20 pages, I don't know how many words that is, 20 pages, one sentence rubbed me the wrong way. And that's what I'm focusing on. And everything else in the evaluation felt fine to me. So does this happen for you? Another minor thing that happened is I was doing one of these activities that I do, and somebody had asked how I was doing, and I'd been through a lot recently, and sometimes I struggle with when somebody says, how are you? Like, do you just say fine? Do you really tell them the truth? What do people want to hear? Am I being too much? This is the masking. And I just said, I'm fine, and asked them about them. And then we did our own thing. And then at the end, I thought, I wonder if they think that I'm being distant and not connecting. And so I just said, when you ask me sometimes how I am, I don't really know. Do you really want to hear what's going on? Or do I just say fine? I don't mean to be pushing you away. And they were incredibly compassionate. And then I just shared, I recently have been diagnosed as autistic, and I realizing how much I struggle with this stuff. And she was so sweet. She gave me a hug and asked how I felt about the diagnosis. I said, it totally fits. And she said, not to worry, and let's grab coffee. And it ended up being fine, but I actually got tearful. And this was kind of on the heels of this big kerfuffle in this group of autistic professionals where I felt like this is my safe space. And so now I'm having this awareness of how much I am aware of these social things. And it's interesting. One of the group activities that I do, I've noticed that if I don't initiate saying hello to certain people, they don't say hello to me. And I don't know if people just expect me to make the first move. And if I don't make the first move, then they think I don't want to talk, or if they're just shy. Like, I don't understand this. I really don't understand some of these social constructs. And maybe in the past, I haven't worried about it. One of the things that was interesting is in this group of autistic professionals, all three of them said that they felt intimidated by me. Not that I'm intimidating, but I think just how I show up, my awareness, how I express myself felt intimidating. And I can't really do anything about that. And I don't know if that impacts how people respond to me. Like, I just don't know. And I'm perplexed. One of the things I want to share, and this is really about me. I pretty much constantly have low-grade disappointment in people that are very close to me, people that show up for me, people that love me, people that care, that would do anything for me. I'm just recognizing that there is a very young part of me that kind of wants the whole world to show up for me. We've talked about this before, show up for me in a way that people just can't. I'm not an infant. I'm not a child. There is nobody who's going to be attuned to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I find myself constantly having this low-grade disappointment. And I have decided to not say anything about it because nobody is failing me. Nobody is doing anything wrong. This is about how much I'm dysregulated. And I suspect because of the PDA, having needs, having things go on, feeling uncertain, wanting to connect because that's very co-regulating for me. And when people aren't available in the moment, or they don't know what to do, or I have a hard time asking for it because of my PDA, I end up feeling hurt and disappointed because it's like a kid, like I'm uncomfortable and I just want it to be fixed. I've really gotten very good at sitting with the disappointment, and there's nothing to say. Nobody is doing anything wrong. And I just constantly have this low grade disappointment, and it's about me and it's not about anybody else. And I talk to you about being assertive and letting people know what you need and having difficult conversations, but this is not that. And the only reason why I'm naming it is I am confident that historically this has been problematic in relationships for me because I just expect people to show up a certain way, and when they don't, I verbalize it, and then people feel like they just can't get it right because it's never going to be enough. So does any of this resonate for you? It's not something I really like talking about. And nobody's doing anything wrong. Gosh, I have a couple things I want to talk about. It's interesting. I have really been doing a lot of reading around people that are autistic tend to have very high levels of anxiety. And there are times in my life where I would have the wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, worrying about things. Every time my kids drive home, I have a little catastrophic thinking in my head. And when they get home, I feel, safe, that they're home safe. But what I'm wondering is if I have chosen for myself to reframe what is probably anxiety as just something else. And a listener reached out to me and talked to me about why is autism listed in the DSM, which is how we do our diagnoses, and why is it listed as a disorder? And it's not. It's how our brains are wired. And pathological demand avoidance is not in the DSM, but even the name pathological, it has a negative connotation, and why do we see these things as disorders versus neurobiology and how our brains are wired? And I do believe that it is very problematic. I mean, women still aren't even being recognized as autistic because the DSM is so far behind. But I really have been thinking about this concept about anxiety. I wish I could think of specific examples to give you, and I guess I hadn't thought about this enough. But I do think that a lot of the things that I worry about, I just have reframed them so that it just feels like it's very average for me. And it's like if I struggle to get up and go exercise in the morning, I don't know that that's about anxiety. It's probably task initiation and transitions. I guess I'm going to have to think on this a little bit more. So the last two things that I want to talk to you about before we wrap up is I've been really working about being very clear upfront about my needs and expectations when I recognize it. I think that I had shared with you about, I was with some friends, and the last time we had gone out, we had sat outside and we went to go to the same place again. And I assumed that we would sit outside, and they've been going out and I haven't joined them, and they didn't want to sit outside. And I felt incredibly hurt and disappointed. And it was a very painful experience. And I did not communicate what my needs were ahead of time. And that would have been, it's important for me to sit outside. If that doesn't work for you, then I'm not going to go. But I didn't do that. And I just was talking with a friend today who, this is a belated birthday gift. So I'm recording this almost the end of September. My birthday was the end of July. And there's a restaurant that she wanted to take me to. And so we talked this morning, and I said, do they have outdoor seating? Because it's the only way that I'm going to go is if we can sit outside. Is that okay with you? So able to learn from this past experience that if that's a need that I have, then I need to be upfront and clear with people about what it is that I'm needing. Are there things that you're wanting or needing that you're expecting or thinking that people understand, and when they don't, you get frustrated? And I don't think I've ever said to anybody before, what I tend to say is, I'll defer to the group, this is what I would prefer. But I don't say, if we don't eat outside, this doesn't work for me, and then I'm going to go. I haven't said that. I know sometimes having hard conversations, I know conflict can be very difficult. Are there areas where you're wanting and needing things and you haven't said it? I don't know what it is, but scheduling things is also really hard for me. I don't know if it's because I can't figure out if I'm going to be in the mood, but this is 2 months after my birthday. And finally, we spontaneously made a decision when we were face to face today. So is that ADHD? Is that autism? Is it just challenges? I don't know. And the last thing I want to talk a little bit about too is I have been incredibly understimulated recently. I've been feeling bored. I've been feeling restless. I read a book. I love reading, and then I finish it, and then having to start, I call it a book friend. I have a hard time making a new book friend. That transition is really hard. I wanted to do this craft, and Steve and I went out a couple weekends ago and got everything I needed. I made one. I got enough to make like 6 crafts. I made one, and like all this stuff is sitting in the kitchen, and I just haven't done it. And then I thought, I want to work with animals. So I reached out to our old dog trainer who moved out of state, but asked her, does she recommend that I work with volunteer with the Humane Society, or there's some other things? And she gave me some resources, or said she would follow up. And she connected me with one resource, and really it hasn't panned out. And so I need to figure out what to do. But what I recognize is that when I'm understimulated and I'm not hyper-focused on anything, I get more sensitive. And so we talked about that thing of that constant low-grade disappointment. And if I'm not feeling fulfilled, my world gets small, and then I depend on people even more, or I'm wanting people to regulate me more because I don't have enough that's filling me up and making me feel really excited. I was just talking with the online HSP course is going on right now, and one of the members is autistic, and I asked if she could stay on the call after everybody left last night. And we were talking about, I really do want to do an autistic group like the HSP course, but for autistics. And then I was wondering if maybe doing a group for people that are wondering if they're autistic. I mean, I'm not going to diagnose anybody, but I'm wondering if talking to other people and having some things that we can look at would be helpful. I'm sharing this with you because these are things that are interesting to me. I also had a colonoscopy a week ago. Everything's fine, but it was kind of a wake-up call that I probably need to not eat like an unsupervised child anymore. This could change tomorrow. So tomorrow I could be back to eating the way that I am, but I'm trying to use food and nutrition, which has always been a special interest anyways. It used to be diet. I don't want to do diet. I don't want to talk about losing weight, but I do want to talk about health and nutrition and some things I can do for my body that are going to be good for me. So trying to generate some interest in getting some new special interests and hyper-focus because I need something. And again, I'm sharing this with you that if you're in a place where you are not doing things that are stimulating to you, your world has gotten small, maybe you're very much into your routine. If you are COVID conscious, then the numbers while I'm recording are pretty high right now. And I'm less inclined to want to go out and do things in confined, closed spaces. I'm not telling anybody what they should be doing. I'm just saying that limits some of the activities that I do and how I feel about things. Are you feeling that sense of listlessness, depression, boredom, angst? And are there things that you can do to engage in activities that are going to make you feel fulfilled and satisfied? The struggle is real. I think that's it. If any of this resonated with you and you're interested in working with me, the best thing to do is to reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a contact form on my website. If you have any feedback about this episode, anything you're interested in, anything at all, I used to tell, Jen would say, if you have negative feedback, send it to Jen. But I think I'm pretty okay with any feedback. So feel free to shoot me an email, unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. I think that's all I have for y'all. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for the listeners who have been here from the beginning. Welcome to the new listeners. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to show up however you are. Whatever feelings you're having today, if you're feeling like you're not enough, that you're not doing enough, you feel lazy, that's often ADHD, that difficulty with task initiation, switching gears. If you're feeling irritable, if people don't like you, don't get you, don't understand you, I think feeling misunderstood is a big part of being neurodivergent, that we have an intention and people just don't always understand our intentions. And it can be very painful for everybody involved. You have a right to feel joy. You have a right to feel contentment. You have a right to all your feelings, to feel angry and disappointed and sad, to feel like you're getting your needs met, to have satisfaction. All parts of you are okay. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.